She didn't check his phone. She didn't follow his car. She just walked into a restaurant for a quiet dinner alone. And there he was. 2 glasses. One smile too intimate. One touch too rehearsed. So she poured herself a drink. Took a sip. And said, "So this is dinner with a client." Nina from Palm Springs, she didn't find the affair, she walked in on it. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from California. Nina wasn't in the mood to argue. The conversation had been short, clipped, polite. David said he had dinner plans with a client, someone from the New York office, female, just in town for a night. Strictly professional, he had said, without looking up from his phone. She'd nodded. Okay. There was nothing more to say. But the silence afterward had stretched too long. The air between them, once warm, now felt like a waiting room, sterile, filled with tension no one wanted to address. Later, as she stood in her closet debating between takeout and going out, her hand paused over a familiar dress. Black silk, understated, with a neckline just low enough to say she wasn't invisible. She'd worn it on their 5th anniversary. The memory flickered like a distant radio signal. She chose it. 10 minutes later, Nina walked into Maison Palm, a boutique restaurant tucked into the corner of downtown. Intimate lighting, soft jazz, curated wine pairings. Their place, once. The hostess smiled as if she remembered. Table for 1. Nina smiled back. Yes. Actually. And then she saw him. Far corner. Soft candlelight. His back was to her, but she'd know that posture anywhere. Relaxed, leaning in, engaged. A bottle of red wine rested between him and a woman she'd never seen. Younger. Blonde. Smiling. Their hands almost touched on the table. Her voice caught in her throat but didn't escape. She turned back to the hostess, composure intact. Change of plan, Nina said. I'll take the bar. She didn't rush. She didn't cry. She sat, ordered a glass of wine, and let herself observe. They were laughing. David reached for the bottle and poured another round. His fingers grazed the woman's wrist. She didn't pull back. Nina watched as if watching a play unfold. Not her story, just one she had unknowingly bought front row tickets to. Every movement was rehearsed. The tilt of his head. The pacing of his smile. The casual brush of fingers that, to anyone else, might have passed as accidental. But Nina knew David's tells. He was performing. She didn't need to know the woman's name. She didn't need to hear the lies. She had all the information she needed right there, in body language and half-empty glasses. This was not a meeting. It was a rendezvous. And somehow, that hurt less than expected. Not because it wasn't painful, but because it confirmed something her intuition had been whispering for months. She took another sip of her wine. The jazz track changed. The lighting flickered as the server adjusted a dimmer. Nina stood. She walked slowly, confidently, across the restaurant. Her heels didn't click, they landed soft, but steady. As she reached their table, David looked up. He froze. his mouth opened slightly, as if he might greet her. Explain. Apologize. She didn't give him the chance. She reached for their bottle, poured herself a third glass. Held it up. Swirled. Sipped. Then said, calmly, to no one in particular, so this is dinner with a client. The woman looked between them, wide-eyed. David's lips parted again, but no sound followed. Nina set the glass down on the table. Enjoy the wine. Then turned. And walked out. No shouting. No scene. Just silence and the truth, left standing like spilled candle wax in her wake. Nina didn't flinch. Her steps were measured, slow enough to remain poised, fast enough to let no doubt creep in. She didn't hesitate, didn't blink. She approached the table like she belonged there because once, she would have. David looked up first. His expression changed in layers: recognition, disbelief, panic, shame. The woman across from him, blonde, delicate, too amused a moment ago, followed his gaze. Nina said nothing at first. She reached for the bottle in the center of their table, her hand steady as glass. She picked up the bottle, tilted it slightly, poured a precise amount into the third glass she'd just taken from the neighboring empty table. The sound of the wine pouring was the only sound. She raised the glass. Observed the color against the candle light. Swirled it slowly. Took a sip. Then her eyes met David's. So this is dinner with a client. Her voice was soft. Civil, not a trace of sarcasm, not an ounce of rage. Just fact. The blonde woman shifted uncomfortably. Her chair creaked as she straightened. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then didn't. David tried to speak. Tried again. Nothing landed. Nina looked at both of them. She didn't smile, but her calm was louder than any scream. She set the glass down gently. Not slammed. Not dropped. Just placed it. She nodded toward the bottle. Nice choice. We used to drink that one. The sentence wasn't meant to hurt. It wasn't a dagger. It was a mirror. She turned. Each step away from the table felt like closing a curtain. One more row of fabric between her and whatever performance they had planned. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. As she reached the restaurant doors, the maitre d' glanced up, perhaps expecting a scene, perhaps expecting a collapse. But Nina gave him a polite nod. Almost as if she were leaving a dinner that had gone just fine. Outside, the desert air was cool, dry, sharp. She inhaled deeply. The night wrapped around her like clean linen. She hadn't broken. She hadn't faltered. She had stepped into the middle of the show and walked off stage without applause. Not because she needed to prove anything, but because she refused to play along. The pain was there. Of course it was. Not because he had touched someone else, but because he'd done it so comfortably, so publicly. As if her intelligence wasn't something to account for. That was what burned. The arrogance. Not the betrayal itself, but the assumption that she'd never see it. That she'd never act if she did. She walked the block slowly. Let the heels carry her home like punctuation, each step a full stop. By the time she unlocked her front door, she wasn't fuming. She was rewriting. Not the story. The ending. The house was silent when she stepped inside. No lights. No music. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the quiet echo of her own breath. Nina closed the door behind her and stood still for a moment. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She walked to the bedroom with the same calm precision she'd carried through the restaurant. The suitcase was already halfway under the bed. She slid it out, laid it open, and began folding. Not in haste. Not in rage. Every item she packed felt like a boundary being re-established. A line being redrawn. She didn't take much, just enough to leave clean. Her wardrobe had always been curated: neutrals, confidence, structure. She chose pieces that would match silence with strength. A laptop. A small jewelry case. Her favorite black heels. The same ones that had walked her across a lie and out the door without a tremble. She zipped the suitcase. Placed it by the door. Then sat down at her desk. No tears. No deep sighs. Only the quiet tapping of keys as she opened her email. To David Carter. Subject: left blank. Message: next time you perform in public, remember, some of us don't applaud. We leave. She hit send. Closed the laptop. Looked around the room. It looked the same, but it no longer held her. Not really. At 2:03 a.m., she ordered a ride. She didn't hesitate when the driver arrived. He offered to help with her suitcase. She thanked him. 20 minutes later, she stood in the lobby of the Solane, a quiet boutique hotel tucked behind date palms and stone fountains. She had once planned a wedding here. It had been beautiful. Honest. Two people who knew exactly who they were. She remembered thinking, that's what I want one day. Now she just wanted clarity. The night manager recognized her. Checking in, Ms. Carter. She nodded. Just Nina now. He didn't ask questions. Handed her the key. Room 204. It overlooked the courtyard. Soft lights flickered in the trees. A pool glistened quietly below. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself exhale. Not broken. Not ruined. Just removed. Removed from a role she hadn't auditioned for. Removed from a script she hadn't written. Removed from a man who thought deception looked better in dim lighting. She didn't regret walking in. She only regretted not walking out sooner. And now she had. No applause. Just stillness. And the knowledge that next time, she wouldn't wait to be written out. She'd write the scene herself. Nina didn't share her story out of anger. She didn't name names. She didn't detail the wine, the woman, or the words she didn't say. She simply wrote what it felt like to walk into a room and realize the play had already begun without her. She titled it "The Night I Interrupted His Play." It was a quiet essay. Less about betrayal, more about disorientation. Less about blame, more about clarity. It spoke of timing, of presence, of the moment you realize you're not part of the scene but part of the set. the difference between being loved and being used as a backdrop. She posted it late one night on a forum for women in hospitality. Within days, it was everywhere. Shared on newsletters for female creatives. Quoted in podcasts. Screenshot on Instagram stories. Her inbox filled slowly, then all at once. I didn't know how to walk out. You just showed me. I've been applauding too long. I didn't realize I was the audience, not the partner. Nina, read them all. She answered none. Not because she didn't care, but because she wasn't trying to start something. She was trying to end something with grace. She was not a speaker. Not a coach. She didn't Monetize the moment or chase a following. She just continued to do her job, live her life, and keep her own curtain closed. She declined invitations to speak. She turned down interviews. When asked if she'd write more, she answered honestly, I wrote it because I needed to stop clapping. The applause, after all, had never been for her. She walked through her days now with a quiet surety. She said less, observed more. She knew how to spot rehearsed affection. She knew how to feel when someone was performing instead of being. She didn't go looking for new love. She went looking for her own rhythm. No curtain calls. No encore. Just clean light. Open space. And the firm knowledge that she would never again sit through a performance that required her silence. She had learned that walking away wasn't the end of the show. It was the beginning of real life. And this time, the script was hers to write. No audience. No spotlight. Just her. The woman who didn't clap. Some women leave quietly. No shouting. No broken glass. Just a full glass of red wine. And the decision not to stay for the final act. But in our next story, the betrayal doesn't happen in silence. It happens in court. When a woman from Sacramento is asked to testify for her husband, she finds herself sitting beside the woman he swore he'd never see again. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from California. Because some betrayals don't wait for discovery. They show up on the witness stand.